Hi, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and in this video I want to show you my workflow for working with multiple cameras while editing in Reaper. For this demonstration, I have here in front of me my main camera. This is my second camera that I usually don't use, but I have it here for the demonstration. I also have a third camera, and I have my computer that is also acting as a camera just for the purpose of demonstration. You can think of the computer screen as another camera. Also, I have this idea of an overlay. So I appear as a box here on the side of my screen, and I consider that yet another camera. So the workflow that I'm going to show you in this video works for working with as many cameras as you need, and it's super simple to use, and it's similar to what you would find in other non-linear editors. So you can bring the same concepts and workflow you may already know from different software into Reaper. And also you can take advantage of the extra features that I think only Reaper has in terms of rendering audio, but also in terms of video. If you follow this channel, then you probably have already seen another video in which I show an effect that is an Automixer for video, capable of switching between different cameras based on the audio. So if you have a podcast with multiple cameras pointing at different people or a round table, you can switch to different cameras based on who is speaking. And you can take that approach of the Automixer and combine it with this approach I'm going to show in this video. So I'm going to stop recording now and jump into Reaper and show you how I am doing this. I'm also going to give you a full overview of the code, and I'm going to explain how everything works. So let's jump right in. Okay, so this is all very meta, but now I have stopped all the cameras. I transferred the footage to my computer, and I have here in Reaper a project in which I have all the cameras and my computer screen, and I have this multicam setup working already. I want to show you how I can edit using this, and then I will show you how to set everything up and how to install things. But first, I want to give you a taste of what this can do. So here I have a preview of all my cameras, and I have the currently selected camera. So I can, and you should know that I synced up all the footage using the old style method of clapping. So I saw a spike in the audio, and then I saw where my hands met in all the footage, and then I synced up that way. Nothing fancy there. I already did this off camera because I think that is something that people kind of already know how to do. And if you don't, then you can look up other videos. For instance, the Reaper blog has a great video on how to do this. I think they have like a couple of videos actually. Anyway, so I have already done all the syncing, and I have here all the different cameras, and my computer isn't great when playing video. So you're going to see some stutters while playing back, especially because now I have 5 different sources of video, 5 cameras. But the idea here is that I can play and I can switch to a different camera. Oh, this is especially slow now that I'm recording this screen as well. But I can switch to a different camera. For instance, here I am pointing to the other camera, this camera, so I can switch to this one, and then I can switch back. And this is just previewing, but I can make these changes permanent. Look at this item here. When I do a cut, like for instance, now I'm looking at the computer, so I guess I should cut to this view. So I'm now cutting to this view, and that is not only for preview. If I come back here, I am switching from that camera, and in that item, I'm switching to this other camera. And I can keep doing this. I can select this item, and I can keep splitting it. So you could just play this in real time if your computer is fast enough to handle all this media. You could even put this full screen and just start editing by changing the cameras. And I'm hitting some keyboard shortcuts that change the camera. And of course, this is non-destructive. So you can always come back here and change where the camera is going to switch. Or you can decide that, no, actually in this part, I don't want this camera. I want this other one because I'm looking at that camera. So I want to switch to camera 2, so you can do that. You can decide which camera is going to run. Look at the item here. You can see which camera is going to play. And when I hit play, then you actually see the preview. So if I change to camera 4 here, then I can see that it's now switching to camera 4 in this position. And of course, this is all for preview. This is what I do while I'm editing. But I can always, when I'm ready to render this, I can disable this track. I'm going to show you what this track is doing later, but I can disable this track, and now this is in full screen. So the camera switches are happening in full screen. That is what is going to be the rendered video. And that's a similar workflow to what you would find in nonlinear editors. It's super comfortable for editors to work like this. And your cameras don't necessarily have to be a camera like 2, 4, and 5 are cameras. They can be things like composites. So this camera 1 is actually not just a camera, it's the composite that you are watching right now. It is a camera overlaid on top of my desktop. I'm going to show you in a future video how to do this overlay. It's not super simple, especially because of these rounded corners around the camera. And you have to use masks to do this. Also, I'm going to show you how to do this in a future video. But also, if you want to work with the Automixer, as I said, you can do that as well here. Just drop another track that is an Automixer. So that's how you can work with this multicam setup. Now I'm going to show you how to work with the project to put the things in place so that they can work like this with the multicam. So let's look at the project that we have here. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually delete the tracks that have the multicam setup. So if I delete those tracks, this is just 5 tracks of regular video in Reaper, nothing fancy here, just the cameras. But of course, I can only see the top one, which is the composite of my screen. So that's what the preview looks like right now, but I can mute this track and you can see all the tracks underneath. So to do the setup for this, first, you have to, of course, go to my repository, which will be linked below. And you have to come here to FX chains. And I don't know any better way to do this because I don't think I can distribute FX chains or video processor presets using Repack. So I don't know any better way to do this. The only way I know how to do this is you actually go to the repository, which will be linked below, and you can download these effect chains. The effect chains are just video processors. So you can click here on the effect chain and probably here in RAW. This will give you the raw file, which you save somewhere. And probably the best place to save this is in your Reaper installation. So in my Mac, it's under Library, Application Support, Reaper FX Chains. And then you can go there and install this or save this. I already did this, but you have to do that for both of these effect chains that have to do with multicam. Right now, those are the only effect chains in the repository, but if you're watching this in the future, there may be other ones here as well. And if you don't know where your Reaper directory lives, your configurations for Reaper, then you can come here to Reaper Reaper Options, and then show Reaper Resources Path in Explorer Finder. You are looking for the folder that is named FX Chains. Here it is. So that's where you want to drop the FX chains. And now we are going to create 2 tracks, put them on top of all the video tracks. And on this one, what we are going to do is actually select the camera that is active. So for this one, we are going to put an effect here that is the selector, the multicam selector. If you have already downloaded and installed it, the effects chain in the right repository, but you don't see these, you probably need to right click. Down this bar is good. There are other places that work as well, I think. Yeah, right here as well. You right click, scan for new plugins. It should show up, multicam selector. That's the one you want. And you add this. Later in the video, I'm going to show you how this works and what this code is doing. But if you don't want to learn about writing video processors, you don't have to care about it. Now you need to add an item that will be that item that is selecting the camera. I recommend that if you disable this, it's not the default, but if you disable this, I recommend that you come here to the Reaper preferences and look for appearance and media and make sure that you are displaying the media item take name, because the take name is going to be the camera that you're selecting. Yeah, it's kind of a hack. Anyway, here you need to insert that item that is going to select the camera. And it's not just any item. Usually people who are working with video processors, they hit command and drag and they put an an empty MIDI item, because an empty MIDI item can hold video processor effects. This will not work if you do this. The only way to make this work is to do what I'm going to show you now. It's to come here to the Actions menu and look for Video Processor and insert dedicated video processor item. This is crucial. An empty MIDI item will not work because a video processor cannot look at the name of an empty MIDI item, but it can look at the name of a video processor item. So that's what you want to do. You want to take a video processor item and drag it across the whole project. And now on this video processor item name, you're going to select the camera. So you can right click and go to item properties and change the name of the take. For instance, if I go to 3, then I am selecting the third camera. This is 1, 2, 3. That's my computer screen. So if I go to preview, you should see my computer screen. And that's annoying, of course. You don't want to have to right click and go to item properties every time. So I have some custom actions, some ReaScripts. You can look for Multicam. And if you don't have my ReaScripts already installed, then you definitely need to install Repack. If you don't know how to do that, then go watch the Reaper blog video showing you how to install Repack. But anyway, you can come here to the repository list on Reaper, find my repository, grab the URL, go to Reaper, come here to extensions and Repack, import repositories, paste the URL, hit OK, install the packages. Then you will have this new ReaScripts. And I assign them to keyboard shortcuts because I think it's simpler to use Multicam that way. So now that I have done this, I actually just clicked here and clicked add, and I said, yeah, I want this to be the number 1. So now when I hit on my keyboard number 1, it changes the name of that item. These actions are nothing fancy. I will show you the code and explain everything that's going on there, but they are nothing fancy. They are just changing the name of the item. You could do that by hand. Anyway, let's come back here to the video processor and I will hit play. And while I'm playing, I'm switching to different cameras. And you can see that that is being reflected here. And there is a slight lag, but that's probably just because my machine is too slow to play this. When rendering, you won't see any lag. When you switch to a different item, so you can split and you can switch this to a different item. So this camera change will be seamless when you actually render the thing. Also, I have some custom actions here, some ReaScripts. You can look for Multicam, and it's to split and select a certain camera. And that's useful when you are doing that workflow that I was talking about. You are just working through and you want to switch to different cameras. So you select the item and play, and you switch to camera 2 now. And then you switch to camera 1. And then you switch to camera 5. And that's all fine and good. But how do you actually have that cute preview I was showing before? Well, that's what this other track is for. You come here to effects and you add the effects chain that is Multicam preview. When you add that, then you will have that nice preview that is showing you all the cameras, also showing you the currently active camera. And of course, when you are ready to render this, you have to disable this track, which will disable the preview. You have to disable the effects on the track, or you can just delete the track altogether if that's what you want to do. Anyway, the point is this track needs to be inactive. I guess even muting it also works. Just something to get the preview off. And that's pretty much everything you need to do to set this up. Remember to select the item when you are editing, and then you can just go full screen, and using the keyboard shortcuts, you can switch to a different camera. And of course, that's non-destructive. So if you make a mistake, you can always stop and go back to the main view and make some changes, because those are just items with a certain name that gets picked up by the effects in the video processor. That's all there is to it. And now in this part, I want to show you the secret sauce. If you are interested in learning how this thing works, then keep watching. If you just want to work with Multicam, thanks for watching. See you later. Now let's talk about code. The code isn't that hard, and it's kind of a good introduction for how video processors work in Reaper. So let's let's dive right into the first processor, that is the selector. So what this is doing is, first of all, I need to grab the name of the item that is selecting the camera. And that is why this item needs to be a video processor item, not just a MIDI item. Because if it is just a MIDI item, then I won't be able to do this trick. So what this is doing is get the name of the item for the item that is right on my track. So I have the effect here on this track. So get the name of the item that is currently right under me, like right under my track. And I should say that this whole environment and the language that we are writing in is covered in another video. I have a video about audio effects, and I developed a beat crusher. It's a simple effect, but the idea there is just to show you this language and the environment in which this works. It is the same language to work with audio effects and video processor, so it's the same language I used there. The language is nothing fancy, and this environment is also nothing fancy. I guess the main thing that is interesting here is that I can select parts of this and then hit Command K to peek the values and look at their current values. So I guess that's probably all there is to it. So when I say, for instance, get input name, I am assigning the name of that item right there to this variable here. And this is just a regular variable. It has this pound sign because it is a string. And this input get name is kind of a weird function in that it returns, the return of the value is actually one of the parameters. So you can think of this as passing by reference if you are familiar with that idea from languages like C and C++. But yeah, the return of this function, the actual name that this function returns, is returned on this variable. And the magical number here, -1 to get the item of the current track. I found that the developer of Reaper commented this on somewhere on the forum, and I just grabbed that. I have no idea why this needs to be -1 to grab the current item. I guess it would make more sense to be 0. But anyway, that's just how the video processor works. Another thing I should mention is if you're new to video processor and you want to see all the functions that are available to you, if you have some video processor in front of you, you can hit Command K on top of a function and it will show you the description of what it does. But also you can hit F1, that will bring the reference. It's not awesome documentation. You have to play around and try it. It's the same as the documentation for ReaScripts. Isn't perfect, but if you just spend enough time with it and you go to the forums and you Google around, eventually you'll figure it out. Anyway, so this is a string that is, for instance, a string containing the number 1. But now I want to turn that into a number. So I am going to use match. It's like pattern matching or string matching. So this is the pattern. It's similar to things like sprintf in C. It's just a pattern that says I want a number. And this is the string. And again, this is kind of weird because this is going to be the output of the match. So this is what the match is returning, but not really. It's a parameter that is being passed by reference, sort of. It's a weird thing. Yeah, this language is kind of weird. And then this is now a number, literally a number. Why do I have to have this as a number? Well, because the other functions below are going to need this as a number. And then I have the selected camera number, and I have to do this trick because sometimes you may not have any items here. So suppose that I just delete this. Now there is no item to select the current camera. And this is usually not a problem. If you have already scrubbed around and you have some other value here, it will just stick around. For instance, I will show you the preview. And here I'm on camera 3. So let me scroll this way so my face is not in front of it. So here I'm on camera 3. And if I come back here where there is no camera, then it just continues being camera 3. It just keeps the old value around. But if you just put this value on a track, this video processor on a track, and there is no video processor item here to select a track, then you would just get a black screen because this number would be 0. Well, here I am saying if the number is 0, then turn it into 1. That's the maximum between 1 and 0. And if the number is some other camera, like you selected camera 5, then the maximum between 1 and 5 is 5. So this doesn't change the selected camera number. And then there is the line that is actually doing the rendering of the video on the screen. So input track is a function that looks at tracks below. So now, for instance, here I'm selecting camera 3. So it's looking at tracks below. The input track is looking at the tracks below this current one. And it can select different tracks to render. And it's indexed by 0, not by 1. So I'm saying that this is camera 3, but actually it is and I count that as, I like to think of this as camera 3, and then this is camera 1, 2, and 3. So it's my computer. Camera 3 is my computer. But really, input track wants to think of this as 0 indexed. So I have to subtract 1 because it actually thinks this as 0, 1, and 2. Anyway, the screen should be showing my computer, and this one is the one that's selected. Perfect. And then GFX blit, I don't know if that's how you say blit. I have never seen someone actually saying this out loud. But anyway, GFX blit is actually doing the rendering. So it's taking the input from track 0, 1, 2, camera 3, and it's actually putting that on the screen. So if I don't have the preview here on top, then that's just what you see. You see my screen. That's the camera that is being shown. So that's all there is to this effect. Now let's look at the preview window, which is probably even more complicated, but not too complicated. And it is definitely the more interesting one. So the first part is the same. I'm just grabbing the number of the selected camera. And the only difference is that the input next item doesn't receive -1, it receives 0. Because now I'm not talking about the current track, but the one right below. And that's why you have to set up the tracks in this exact order, because I'm looking at things in the exact order I mentioned. And that's common for audio, video, other video effects as well in Reaper. Many video effects require you to have a certain structure to your tracks. Anyway, how did I figure that this was 0? I just thought, well, if the other one is -1, this probably is 0, or it's -2. I tried both, and this is what worked. So same deal here, and by the end of this, I have the selected camera number, and I even consider the case in which you didn't select any camera. So that's good. Now, let's actually do the rendering of the preview. To begin with, I'm going to draw a rectangle. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to comment out this whole section, and we are going to look at it step by step. So when I save this, you can see that it's already rendering. I just saved, and it's already showing me the preview. And the preview here is just showing a black rectangle because I am drawing a black rectangle. This is important because if I don't render in some part of the screen, for instance, what happens if I don't render the rectangle? I save now. And yeah, so now this is just doing whatever. It can be rendering something or it can be rendering junk. Sometimes it renders junk. If you don't render explicitly something in your video processor, sometimes it just renders whatever it is in the video frame buffer, which is a bunch of garbled noise. So I am starting by drawing a black rectangle. If you wanted to change the color of the background, I guess you could by changing the color of this rectangle. Anyway, next, I am going to comment out this part, and I'm going to show you the last line, because the last line is probably simpler to explain. So if I uncomment this, then you can see that now I'm showing here on the right of the screen. The preview screen is divided in half. On the right of the preview screen, I am showing the currently rendered camera. So I'm doing in the preview the same thing you would do here in the rendered version. So if I turn off the preview, you can see that this is what would be rendered. Now in the preview, I'm rendering that on the right half of the screen. How do I do that? Well, it's quite simple. I'm using blit as before, and I'm using input track 0, because if you think about it, input track 0 is the track right below me, which is the track that is actually doing the rendering because it's doing the selection. So that's what this last line is doing, is simply rendering that part, that track. And I want to render it on the right-hand half of the screen. So to do that, I have to pass some extra optional arguments to blit. The first is preserve ratio, a preserve aspect, and that is because I don't want this to be stretched out. So suppose I am not passing 1 but 0 here, then it stretches out. And if I pass 1, then it includes some borders here to make sure that this will render in the aspect ratio that the original footage was, or even in the aspect ratio of your project, which is the case here. I can come to the configuration for my project, and it has a preferred video size, so it is respecting that as that part here. And this way, because I'm doing this trick of using preserve aspect ratio here, I don't have to think about what if your videos are in portrait instead of landscape? What if your videos have different resolutions? I don't have to care because Reaper is going to do the scaling for me. And then here I pass extra arguments that are optional arguments, and the X and Y positions, the width and the height of the box that contains the video I'm rendering. So the X position is the width of my whole project. So in my case, I have 2560 pixels as my width. That's something you saw when I went to the configurations, as I just did. And then coming here to the video processor reference, I just hit F1 to open this. You can see that there is a variable called project W that it's already set up for you. That is your video width. And I want to only occupy half of the screen, so I divide that number by 2. The Y position of my blit is 0 because I want to start on the top. And then the width and the height are... The width is just half of the window width, and the height is the whole height of the screen. So if your video is portrait, it will probably occupy from top to bottom of the preview, but it will not occupy from left to right. Anyway, moving on. Now let's look at the thing that renders on the left-hand side, the left half of the screen, which is probably the more interesting part. That is the preview itself. So here I have, first of all, a bunch of setup. And what this setup is doing is, first, it's grabbing the number of cameras that you have in your multicam. In our example here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these cameras should be, well, 5. Well, actually 6 if you think about it, because I also have this one that is selecting, and that one also counts. So it's actually 6. The input track count is a function that returns the number of tracks. It is currently not showing, it's just showing 0. I have no idea why. Maybe I need to play this, or maybe peak would just not work. Sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah, camera is not even found. I don't know what's going on here. Sometimes that's what happens. The peak isn't as good here as it is in JS Effects. Anyway, this input track count is the number 6, -1 cameras is the number 5. And to prove this to you, I want to use a trick that I used in development. I don't know if there is a better way to do this, but it's the equivalent of printf for video processors. So what I do is, first of all, I say that I want to use white. JFX set is going to set the color, and colors are represented from 0 to 1, where 0 is black and 1 is white. So I want to set the color to white, and then I'm going to draw a string that is this string, that is cameras. So I cannot really draw a number, so I have to do the opposite of match, and that is sprintf. Sprintf takes first, let me see. Yeah, it takes the destination, so this is going to be the string cameras string. And then sprintf takes the format. The format is going to be a number. And then sprintf takes the values, which in this case is going to be cameras. And then when I save this, I also have to say that I want to draw this string. And when I save this, open the preview, then you can see here on the top left, and you can change this number around if you need by setting some variables like right before here, yeah, I can set GFX-X and GFX-Y to be, for instance, like 100. And now it's going to render, not on the top left, but it's going to render slightly. It should go down. It's not going. I don't know. In any case, that's a trick you can use to print stuff on the screen and actually inspect your variables if peak doesn't work. You can turn whatever value you have into a string and then draw that string on the screen. Having explained this is also good because we are going to have to render some stuff on the screen for the numbers of the cameras. So it's not all wasted. Anyway, now I have the number of cameras, which is 5 cameras in my case. I can change this. You know what? I'm going to come back here with the number 5. Yeah, the number 5 is there. So just for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to delete one of the cameras, and then the number is now 4. That's the number of cameras. Anyway, bringing it back, 5. Okay, so I'm going to actually delete this for now. And then I have the grid size. The grid size is for instance, if I have 5 cameras, then I want my grid to be, I guess, 3 and then 2. I guess this is easier to think about if you have a square number of cameras. So if you have 4 cameras, you want to see 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have 9 cameras, then you want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 8. So you want to see a grid, and you want this grid to occupy as much of the screen as possible. So what I do here is I take the square root of the number of cameras, and that is, if I have a square, the square root is going to give me the number of cameras in one row or one column, because it's a square. But if you don't have a number of cameras that is a square, like 4 or 9, then I take the ceiling of this square root. So for instance, in my case, I have 5 cameras. The square root of 5 is 2 point something. I take the ceiling, and that's the number 3. So my grid will be 3 by 3. Now I have to find the width and the height of one of those previous screens. So I will have a bunch of previous screens here on the left, and I want to know the width and the height of one of them. That's simple. On the width axis, that is just half the screen because that's the left half, divided by the grid size. So if I have, for instance, 3 cameras in a row, then I'm dividing this by 3, and the width of one of the previous windows is half the screen, divided by 3. And on the height axis, then I just take the whole window, divide by the number of cameras on the grid. Now I'm going to do a loop over all the cameras. So I'm not going to start with camera 0, because camera 0, let's go over here, and I'll disable the preview for now. Camera 0 is the one that is actually selecting, and we have already rendered that on the right of the screen, the right half of the screen. So we don't need to render it again. So camera number starts as 0, and I'm going to loop this camera times. So in our case, we're going to loop 5 times, but I'm already on the first line adding 1 to camera number. So every time I go through the loop, I have another camera number. So it starts with 1, then 2 and 3, and so forth. But you can notice that it skipped 0 because we don't want to render the camera that is currently selected again. And then I'm going to do some math here to compute the index of that camera in our grid. So we have a logical grid of 3 by 3 in this example, but this grid is flexible if you add and remove cameras. And then if I have the x, if you think about the x-axis, then the number of the camera in that axis indexed by 0 is the camera. Let's start thinking about camera 1, for instance. Camera 1, it should be on the top left. So its x and y index should be 0. To get 0 here, I'm taking 1 off that number. So if I have camera 1, now I am looking at this is 0. But then after camera 3, I want this to wrap around. So I am taking the modulo of that and the grid size. So I'm taking the modulo, in this case, of the camera number -1, modulo 3. So if you think about camera 4, for instance, that is 4 minus 1, that is 3. Modulo 3 is 0, so the index is 0. The x index is 0, so it goes to the left again. On the y-axis, I do a similar computation, but instead of looking at the modulo, I divide by the grid size and I take the floor. So for instance, if I am looking now at camera 4 again, so 4 minus 1 is 3, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I take the floor of that is 1. So it goes to the second row, which is row 1. It's hard to keep the indexes around. And then I take the floor of this because this may be a fractional value. So think of camera 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 divided by 3 is 1 point something. I take the floor of that because it should be on row 1, which is the second row. That is the index of the X and Y position in the grid. But now I want to actually have the coordinate in the Cartesian system, and that's the X and Y coordinate where I should draw the preview. So to figure that out, I take the index and I multiply by the preview width. So if the preview width here is that small box, I have, for instance, the second, let's say, the second preview will be preview X index of 1. That's the second one. So it will multiply the preview width by 1. So that's the X position where I should start drawing my preview. And the same for the Y position. Now, I'm going to actually draw the preview window with some lines that are with a single line, actually, this line that is equivalent to this one. So I am just taking the input track of the camera number, and I am, and this time it matches up nicely because I am skipping this track. I'm skipping this track that is doing the camera selection when showing the previews. I don't want to show this again. So camera 1, which is this one, for instance, maps to track number 1. So input track 1, that matches nicely. I don't have to subtract or add anything. I still want to preserve the aspect ratio. This is the X and Y position we just computed, and that's the width and the height for all preview windows as we computed above. So when I save this and I open the preview, now you should see the screens being rendered. Awesome. But there is more. I want to show the number of the cameras, and I want to render in red the currently selected camera. In this case, it's camera 3. So to do that, that's the next part. I'm going to do something similar to what we just did to figure out what cameras was, to debug that printf. We are going to do something similar here. We are going to turn that camera string into, no, it's the other way around. We are going to take that number, the camera number that we are looping over here, turn that into a string using sprintf, the same thing we did before. Now, we want to render that on the screen, but there is, you know what, I'm going to skip over this for now, and I'm going to come back to it. So, I guess I can skip all of this for now. Also this. Yeah, so let's concentrate on this line. So I'm turning the number into a string, and I'm showing the string on a particular position, the position X and Y. So it's on the top left of your preview window. So when I save this and I run, it should be showing the thing here on the top left. But the problem is I never used GFX set. So this is rendering in black. So I'm saving this now, and now it's rendering in white. Also, I need to, when I set the color, it's not setting the color only for the string, it's setting the color for everything that comes after. So you can see a white background on many other things on the screen. Not what we want, so I'm going to re-enable this line. Okay, so now that we have this, we are rendering the numbers here on the screen. But I don't only want to render the numbers, I want to render them in color to show the currently selected camera. So I want to turn this 3 into red. So instead of just doing this, I'm going to look at the camera number and check, is it the same as the selected camera number we got from above here? If it is the same, then set the color to red. Otherwise, set it to white. So here I'm using some extra arguments for GFX set, which is the green and the blue, and I'm setting them to 0. So if I set red equals 1, green and blue equals 0, I end up with red. Otherwise, I am saying that the color should be white. Coming back here, you can see that 3 is rendered in red. Okay, so we kind of already have everything that you saw before. So what's the rest of this deal? The thing is, suppose that your video for some reason is in an aspect ratio that so that this number is being rendered on top of the video. And that is unusual, probably never going to happen. But anyway, I wanted to prevent whatever could happen if you were trying to render on top of the video, and then because maybe your video is white, and then I'm rendering in white and you wouldn't be able to see that. So what I would do is I render a black rectangle around the number, behind the number, but above the video. And you will never see that unless you have a video that has the correct aspect ratio. But anyway, it is here to fix that potential bug. So that's what these two lines are doing. First, I am measuring the size of the string. So I have my camera string that I computed here with sprintf, and there is this function called gfx string measure that takes a string and returns with that weird by reference thing the width and the height of how that string would render. So it doesn't render the string, it just tells you how much it would occupy if you rendered it with the current font selection and everything. And then I use that to draw another rectangle. So similar to this one, it's a black rectangle. It is just on this position with these dimensions. And then I finally do the rendering of the string on top. And when I'm doing rendering in video processors, everything happens in order. So first thing I do is draw a rectangle so it goes up below everything. And then I'm drawing on top of it. So I'm drawing the black rectangle, then I'm drawing all the preview windows, then the rectangle behind the text, then the text that is actually the label, and then finally this. Just to prove my point, I'm going to draw the rectangle here on top, and when I save this, then I just drew a black rectangle on top of everything we rendered, everything goes away. And that is the full story behind the video processors. You can see nothing too fancy, but it gives a nice result. And then, of course, this is the preview window. It's actually something that is, you could even render this if you need it for whatever reason. But of course, the intent is that you disable this and you end up with the rendered video just being the screen, or really the multicam editing you did. Now, to complete, I want to show you the source for the ReaScripts that allow you to select different cameras and to split and select different cameras. And then this video will be over. Let's go talk about ReaScripts. So I'm going to start with this one that is doing just the selection of the multicam, not the split as well. Click here on Edit Action, and then this is the code for it. Nothing too fancy. It's just going to select it's going to look at the selected items and change their name. So first off, I want to look at how many items you have selected, because if you didn't select any items and you try to change if you try to run this action, then you get this error. You didn't select any item. And to show this error, I am checking the number of items, and if it's equal to 0, then I show you an error message and a return, but I'm not really in the middle of any functions. When I say return, effectively what this is doing is just halting the execution of the whole ReaScript. If you're new to ReaScript and new to Lua, then you should watch my previous video on this channel in which I talked about a very simple ReaScript, the whole API help and how to navigate that. Also, a very brief introduction to Lua. So we are now talking about Lua, a different programming language used to write ReaScripts. You can also write ReaScripts in the language we used to write the video processor, but Lua is much more commonly used for ReaScripts these days. The documentation for Lua is way better than the documentation for EEL. As good as that documentation is, it's not awesome. And Lua has many more features. It's more comfortable. Anyway, it's a better language to write in, I think. Anyway, coming back here, I am right after doing that check and potentially showing an error to the user and halting the process altogether. But if that's not the case, then I'm now going to do a trick similar to a trick I did in the previous video to select some part of the name of the file and use that in my script. And why is that? Because I have many actions here. You can see that I have 20 cameras. And this is not a fixed limit. In fact, the video processors handle any number of cameras just fine. So if you wanted to, you could come here and change this item name to be 100, and you could work with 100 cameras. As long as your computer can handle 100 files playing simultaneously. Mine would blow up. Anyway, I wanted to make all these actions, and I wanted this to be very easy. So the source for all the actions is exactly the same. And the source is looking at the file name to determine what camera should be selected. So the trick here is I'm using this function that returns a bunch of information from the file, including the file name. The file name is the second thing that is returned, so I select that. And then I match using a Lua pattern. It's something similar to regular expressions, but not quite. A Lua pattern to get the number that is on the end of the string right before .lua. This is escaping the dot, because dot in a Lua pattern represents any character, but I want literally dot. And then a bunch of digits. So this is just a digit. This is one or more digits. And this is, the parentheses mean, please capture this part. That's the part that I'm interested in. All this is just to note that I'm in the right place. And that's because this function is actually going to return the whole path, not only the file, but the whole path to the file. And the path to the file could have other numbers in it. So maybe you have your Reaper configuration in a folder named 4567. In that case, I want to make sure that I'm selecting the digits that are right before the name of my script. And then that's the camera that I'm selecting. And now I move on to loop over every item. So I have the items count from before. I'm looping over every item. It starts with 0 and goes up to item count -1. And I use this incantation to change the name of the item. In fact, the idea of changing the name of an item doesn't really make sense, because if I come here to item properties, you can see that the name is the take name. So currently with this idea here, we are only using one take per item. So you can kind of think of takes and items as the same thing, but they're not. You could record multiple takes on the same item, and you can select different takes from an item. So an item is kind of a container for multiple takes. And the name refers to the take. It's associated with the take, not associated with the item. So the first thing I have to do is grab the media item for that particular index. If there are 6 items that you have selected, then this function will be called 6 times, because we'll go over this loop 6 times. And each time we will get, given this index, we'll get the first thing that was selected, the second thing that was selected, and so on. And the 0 here is necessary because I'm talking about the current project. You could have multiple projects open in Reaper, but I'm talking about the one that is currently in front of you. That's what the 0 means. So that's getting the item. Now, let's get the active take. And in our case, there is only going to be one take anyway, but we have to take the active take. That is the only take, but that's the one that has a name associated with it. And then we use this get set media item take info string, excellent name, to set the p name, excellent choice, pyp property maybe? I don't know. And then camera, that's the camera. So it's conveniently returned as a string here, and that's what we want to do. We actually want to use this as a string. It's the string containing a number, but nevertheless, it's a string. And then we say true because we want to set. If we wanted to get the name of the current item, we would say false. So in effect, this is kind of equivalent to what we had in the video processor when we were doing the selection of the input get name. That's in a video processor, a different language, a different method or function, and a different API. And this is in a ReaScript. Anyway, the idea is the same. So that's how you do the selection of the items and you change their name. Now, to complete this, let's look at the search for split and set the selected camera selection items to camera 1. So let's edit this action and look at it. So it's almost the same as the one that we looked at before. It's almost the same as this one. The only difference is here, this line. So if you have selected some items and your script has not stopped on this return, then I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other one, but I'm also going to do this. And that is just run one command, one action, one Reaper action. That's all you have to do. You just, let's come here to the actions menu and look for the thing that splits. So split item, add edit, or play cursor. We copy the ID for this action. And we come here, and there is this ReaScript function that you can call that runs any Reaper action by ID. So the ID I copied was this one. That's the ID I'm using. And I need to pass this flag that is 0. I have no idea why this flag needs to be 0. It's just there in the documentation. It needs to be 0. So 0. I don't even know if this is the same flag as this one. That means the current project. I have no idea. The documentation just says flag. And then there are some example of uses in the ReaScript website, and it is the number 0 that appears there. Anyway, this is running that action. So it's similar to, you could, in fact, reproduce this if you came here to actions and you created a new action that is a custom action, and you just said split items, added cursor, and then multicam, set selected cameras to 1. This is similar, though it's not exactly the same, because split items or edit at play cursor will not check if you have not selected any items. So if you did the custom action route, if you try to do that with a custom action as I just showed you, it would not work exactly the same, because you can see here, for instance, I have no items selected at all. And when I split, I just hit a keyboard shortcut to run that action. When I split, it is actually splitting all the items. So I thought it would be better to actually have a custom ReaScript to warn you if you tried to split and select a scene or a camera when you haven't selected any items, because it would be annoying to try to do this with the custom action. I'm doing this by hand, so I'm splitting and then I'm selecting, and now all the items are named too. This still works, as long as you're not doing any shenanigans with the names of these items, maybe with other video processors or whatever. As long as you don't care about the names of these items, this would also work. But I find it annoying, so I thought it would be better to just have a custom action, a ReaScript, that does the right thing and checks if you have selected one of these items. And that is it. Thank you for watching this far. I hope you find this useful both in terms of using multicam in your projects and also in learning how to write video processors and ReaScripts in Reaper. It's super fun. It's awesome how you can create that many interesting things in so short code. I think it's fascinating that Reaper is so versatile that way. I mean, I thought about how I could do multicam, and I sat and I developed this. It wasn't that hard. I mean, navigating the documentation wasn't awesome, but it wasn't that hard. It's amazing that you can create this kind of functionality that doesn't exist with so little code. It's awesome. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you learned a lot in this video. And if you're interested in Reaper, in programming, in audio effects, in video processors, in ReaScripts, things that have nothing to do with Reaper as well, I am going to do some videos that have nothing to do with Reaper. Then subscribe to this channel. I am posting videos very often these days. We'll see how that goes. And I'm having a lot of fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you on the next one. Bye.